And for us, no pun intended, but the devil is in the details. And, drawing those thematic threads or those moments which allow us to connect with people or places outside of our normal time, that's the real fun and the excitement for us. So using storytelling to make history more accessible is a big part of what we do. But also, of course, as you said, the other part is we want to provide kind of a thrilling experience where people are questioning, was that real? Could this have happened? What if this happened to me? How would I respond? So kind of a nice hybrid between the history and kind of a lived experience of being in a moment, in a place, and hearing these wonderful stories.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 196 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I have an interview with Jim Dean. For 18 years, Jim Dean has been the creative director of Haunted Walks, Inc., which runs ghost tours and other paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. He's also the host of the company's popular Haunted Talks podcast, which explores dark history and ghost stories from around the world. And it was fantastic to get a chance to chat with Jim. And I'm going to talk about, in my reflections, a little bit about just how important this Haunted Walks group has been to me personally, my understanding of Canadian history, and as well as my writing career. But that's coming up later in this episode. But first, we're going to hear from this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. And I would like to take this time during the ad read to congratulate this episode's sponsor for their recent win of London Book Fair International Excellence Awards. Held in partnership with the Publishers Association, LBF announced that Findaway Voices has won the Audiobook Publisher Award for 2021. The judges said Findaway Voices demonstrated such strong commitment to developing a wider and more open audiobook world for authors, publishers, and listeners alike. We felt, they said, that Findaway Voices offers fresh opportunities for authors and narrators to create wonderful, high-quality recordings that reach existing audiobook fans and create new ones across the globe. Now, Findaway Voices launched its platform in 2017, and since then, they've enabled thousands of independent authors and publishers globally to create and sell audiobooks to a wide international market of retailers and libraries. And in response, in accepting the award, Will Degas, the head of Findaway Voices, said, Findaway Voices is honored to be chosen as the winner of the Audiobook Publisher Award, and we'd like to dedicate this award to all the independent authors and narrators who use our platform. We believe in the power of storytelling, and driven by the courage, resilience, and grit required to be an independent author, we are continually inspired by their work and will continue to improve our platform to better serve authors and the audiobook industry as a whole. Our team is proud to win this award and even more excited for what the future holds for authors on our platform, said Degas. We're only just getting started. So, congratulations to Will and all of the amazing folks at Findaway Voices who provide powerful tools for narrators, for authors, for publishers, which ultimately results in more goodies for audiobook listeners. And if you want to see how you can get started with audio using Findaway Voices, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now we'll look at some recent comments on social media, etc. from recent episodes. Edwin Downward over on Twitter, at Edwin Downward, said, Your latest Stark Reflections had me reflecting once again. I've listened to a wide range of writing podcasts over the years, but as I get closer to releasing my third novel, I need to create a working process to implement all that advice into a launch plan. And he was talking about Mal Cooper in episode 195 because Mal was talking about, you guessed it, a book about launch plans, because Edwin later revealed in a back and forth on Twitter that he had been aware of the ads, Facebook ads, Help My Facebook Ads Suck book for authors, but was not familiar with a launch plan. So I'm so glad that you picked up on that, and so glad you reflected on that, Edwin. Thanks for sharing that. Regina Joyce Clark at Regina Clark 1 on Twitter said, have you printed a large print bookmark? If so, large print bookmark. No, she didn't say bookmark. A large print book, comma, mark. If so, what are your cover dimensions? I read that libraries wanted 18 font for large print, and my mystery is 270 pages in standard 5.5 by 8.5. When I apply the larger font and make it 6 by 9, I get 730 pages. That can't be right. And I replied, I'm not going to read the reply, I'm just going to kind of talk through the reply, but that is a great question. Thanks for asking it, Regina. Now, I haven't actually done a large print yet. Like many things, I like writing series books, which I only just started last year. It's still on my to-do list. But one of the large print books that my publisher Dundurn did for me, for Haunted Hamilton, which was the first book I did with them. Now, Haunted Hamilton regularly measures 8.5 by 5.5, and the Haunted Hamilton large print measures 10 by 7 inches. So 10 inches by 7 inches. So it's, almost like a full size of paper. And it used, I'm not sure the font size, maybe it was 18 point, but I measured it to be about 1/4 of an inch high. And that book goes to 244 pages, but the original was 200 pages. So just expanding those margins, making it a larger format book allows you to keep the paper cost down. Because again, if you're making large print books, that's one of the things you got to keep in mind. You want to keep the cost down as much as possible for you, for the expense, so that you have some margin to play with. But also at the end of the day, you still want it to be a reasonable price. Yes, I know every single ebook is a large print book, but there's still, the majority of readers are still not reading ebooks. And so people who need large print books may not be willing to go into ebooks. And so, making that an affordable, viable option. And thanks, Regina, for the question and the reminder that, there's more things that I need to try to figure out doing. But I'm glad you're doing that. I'm curious to see how that goes. And thanks for asking that question on Twitter. Over at starkreflections.ca on episode 195, Katie Mack commented and said, just listen to episodes 194 with Eric Brian Moore and 195 with Mal Cooper. What a study in contrast between guests. Could anyone be more diffident and self-effacing than Eric? Could anyone be more outgoing than Mal? Someone should write a series starring them. Audio Quest 14. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, Kathy. Well, she spells it Katy, so I call her Katie, but I know she's also Kathy. Kathy, tomato. I'm glad you picked up on that, because one of the things I try to do when I schedule the episodes out is I'm trying really hard to bring in different guests with different perspectives, different experiences, whether from traditional publishing, self-publishing. I'm trying to bring in guests from outside the book industry as well, or from related storytelling, such as this episode, where definitely very much storytelling in a theatrical sense. But I'm glad you picked up on that, because it's evidence that successful people in our industry are not all the same. They all come with a different approach. Mal and her wife are both writers, and they do some things together and some collaborations with other people. Eric, his partner doesn't do the same thing he does, doesn't work in the same industry, but he's still successful as a narrator. And And that goes true for writers as well. We can come from different walks of life. We can have different backgrounds. We can write different things. We can approach creativity in different ways. We can be introverts. We can be extroverts. We can be self-effacing. We can be confident. All those things. But I'm glad you noticed that, Katie. Thank you for sharing that reflection. So if you wanted to reflect on or comment on any episodes of this podcast, you can reach me over on Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. You can also leave a comment on any episode over at starkreflections.ca. And for my personal update, I am still plugging away on Fright Night's Big City, the latest novel in my Canadian werewolf series. Have done a number of additional interviews. A Sudbury.com article resurfaced a couple days ago. I've been contacted by a wonderful woman who coordinates events out of the Burlington Public Library. Burlington is a city just beside Hamilton, on the Toronto side of Hamilton, Ontario, wanting to do an event with me in the fall related to Fear and Longing in Los Angeles and my Canadian werewolf books. And so speaking of which, I'm probably about halfway through the first draft, and I'm realizing some of the things. I actually just recently placed an order for 5 different books. That this is one of those things, like, you know, a writer's search history or browse history, because I'm constantly looking things up. You know, such as, for example, derogatory terms used for different cultural groups. Because some of my characters, the bad guys, the neo-Nazi racists, use those terms, and so I'm needing to look stuff like that up, which probably maybe reflects badly on me. But so one of the things is, because this is it's a satanic group. Now, it's an offshoot. It's a fictional offshoot of a historic satanic group that I researched for Fear and Longing in Los Angeles when I first introduced them. And of course, they're back again in the next book in more detail and more fright. And so a few resources. I needed to look up some stuff on a resurrection, on bringing back the dead, and actual incantations and charms and things like that. And I also need I need there to be, how do I explain this? So when somebody goes to a farm supply store and buys certain things, like certain types of fertilizer and certain other things, when you buy these 2 or 3 different items, most folks know, they're going to make a bomb because they have those things. And so what I need to have happen is 2 or 3 or 4 items are purchased from either one or more occult shops in New York. And the people who know that when you combine these things, it can create the equivalent of a bomb, but, you know, something more magical, supernatural. And so that's what I needed to do, some detailed research so I can get it right, so that when there are people who understand what certain powers of certain icons or certain crystals or certain ingredients, so I needed to really understand that, so I can be, it's just like when you use a gun and you're describing the way the gun works. If somebody is familiar with that weapon, you know, it's going to kick them out of the book if you get it wrong. So you want the details right. Just like earlier in the book, the restroom at a particular diner in Manhattan, I got some help from somebody who ate there regularly, so that when that scene happens, and there's a scene that has to take place in the women's bathroom, that it can be accurate and understood. So I have in my hands right now, I have the Satanic Bible. That's Anton LaVey. And this is, as a bookseller, I've had my hands on it. I've never really looked at it much, but there's a lot of details in there that are probably going to help me a little bit. And then one of the other books that came in so far is The Black Arts, the 50th Anniversary Edition. This is by Richard Cavendish. This is an absorbing account of witchcraft, demonology, astrology, and other mystical practices throughout the ages. Now, I have 2 other books along these lines with lots of details, and I haven't actually had a chance to sit down and I've got the highlighters ready to go through and find some of the details and the sticky notes that I'm going to be able to incorporate into that novel. And of course, as luck would have it, I didn't research this before I started writing the book. It's like halfway through and let's go look this up. Just like I was halfway through writing Fear and Longing in Los Angeles when I ended up starting to read the academic book Hitler's Monsters, as I was, formatting the bad guys for the group. So I'm having a really good time with this novel. The research, again, I'm probably on some sort of well, maybe not CIA because I'm in Canada, but maybe CSIS RCMP watch lists, unless they just know I'm a writer, because I'm constantly looking up macabre things like that. And next week, I get to start working on a few of those nonfiction books, including one of the ones that I'm collaboratively writing with Joanna Penn called The Relaxed Author. But that's it for my personal update. Why don't we get into this wonderful conversation with Jim Dean from Haunted Walks, Inc. Jim, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mark. Looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. Where to start? So, okay, Haunted Walks. Let's talk a little bit about the origin of Haunted Walks and then how you got involved. Let's go back to the superhero origin story here.
Yeah, in the beginning, eh? Our CEO and founder, Glen Shackleton, in 1994, while attending Queen's University in Kingston, took a semester abroad. And Queen's owns a castle over in England where you can do kind of a semester. So while Glenn was there, he toured around the UK a bit, and the culture of walking tours, and in particular ghost tours, was much more firmly established there than it was in North America at the time. I think when we started the following year in 1995, there's only 2 or 3 other companies in Canada offering ghost tours. So Glenn did a bunch of these tourist kinds of excursions while he was there. And as he was studying history at Queen's, he knew Kingston, Ontario, had all of these great kind of dark or weird history stories,
Right.
haunting stories as well. So the following summer, as kind of his summer job in 1995, he opened the Haunted Walk, and there's some classic stories from that first year. Including, literally Glenn would stand there with a canvas sign and be like, Haunted Walk of Kingston. I forget what it was, $5 maybe or something originally tonight. And, people would come up and ask him, we're gonna pay you money just to walk around. So the other very famous tale is one of the very first tours there. Glenn was walking along with a group very close to, I believe it was Skeleton Park in Kingston, which is a great hidden burial site there, hidden cemetery. And a police car rolls up, disco lights going, comes right up on the sidewalk in front of the group, and the officers come out to start asking questions because there have been calls of cult activity.
Oh my God!
Taking
Because
place.
the whole Victorian garb with the lantern and
That's right. Yeah. So Glenn explained to the police officers kind of what was happening, and they actually came back with their families a short time later as well. So from 1995, this company started in Kingston there. The following year, 96, we expanded to Ottawa for tours here in the nation's capital, and then 2000 and I'd have to check now. Time flies so fast. 2011, 12, 13 in there somewhere. We expanded out to Toronto as well.
wow.
So we operate ghost tours, and we call them paranormal adventures in all 3 of those cities, as well as some satellite locations, relatively nearby, like Upper Canada Village in Morrisburg, Ontario. But we really enjoy kind of, we're obviously big history fans. So what we've discovered is ghost tours, ghost stories are a great way to share a little bit of the local history, the local experience, in kind of a really entertaining format. And we have a lot of fun doing them. And our kind of why statement is we create and share extraordinary experiences. So for us, it's all about building those those moments where the hair on your arms kind of stands up unsuspected. You have that emotional reaction you can't control, whether it be fear, delight, surprise, all those kinds of things. So yeah, we've been in business then. We were since 1995, and made it through the first year of the pandemic, and obviously pretty optimistic now that at least the numbers here in Ontario are really starting to drop, and people are very anxious to get out and do things, as we all are frankly,
Yeah,
at this
for
point.
sure.
So that's a little bit about how the company kind of first came about.
Cool. So when you talked about history as an important aspect of these, I do know that it was my experience that the first time I actually thought Canadian history was interesting was on your Ghost Walk tour in Ottawa,
Ah, okay, yeah.
where I was down on Spark Street and started off and learned more about the history of the canals and more of the history of our country. And that for me was a real eye-opening experience because I went, whoa, this is cool. This history thing is neat. How come we never did this in school? Do you get that reaction from people? Do you have like history lovers who go there for the history as opposed to the people who just want the chill?
Yeah, it's a nice combination of the two, and certainly kind of one of the things we're most proud of are the educational groups. In normal times, tens of thousands of students come to Ottawa as part of their year-end trips, grade seven, grade eight. Uh, Groups all across Canada, and we always like to kind of joke that we're kind of slipping history in there between the ghost stories. So yeah, definitely both of those kinds of things. But I mean, I think what you're really speaking to uh, is the power of storytelling. And we can look at a historical event, situation, or a person, and kind of read the Wikipedia page and know those basic kind of nuts and bolts kind of details. But of course, for us, I think the real enjoyment and the real pleasure is kind of it reminds me of uh, the famous radio personality Harvey. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Where it's like, now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And for us, no pun intended, but the devil is in the details. And drawing those thematic threads or those moments which allow us to connect with people or places outside of our normal time. That's the real fun and the excitement for us. So using storytelling to make history more accessible is a big part of what we do. But also, of course, as you say, the other part is we want to provide kind of a thrilling um, experience where people are questioning, was that real? Could this have happened? What if this happened to me? How would I respond? So kind of a nice hybrid between the history and kind of a lived experience of being in a moment, in a place, and hearing these wonderful stories.
It's fantastic. I have to ask them because my best memories, I've gone on multiple tours, but were that the guide was personable and interacted with the people that were there and answered questions and did all this stuff, but they were also a character. They were, it was like they were on stage and yet ad-libbing while telling some
Yeah.
stories. So it almost feels like it's not just like the knowledge and understanding of the history and the story and the details, but they also have to have, it's almost like, like, is that where some of the auditions happen? Is it people with a theatrical background?
Yeah, it's a good point. And there is a certain level of kind of, improv is maybe too strong a word, but
Yeah,
responding to situations. As you might imagine, if you're a tour guide for a school group of very nervous grade six or sevens going into the jail, quite a bit different than if you have an all adult corporate group. So
right.
you're going to change your kind of persona a little bit, how you present the stories, the jokes you might make, of course, as, as you go along as well. But I wonder, it is that thread. Some companies I know are very insistent on their tour guides kind of rigidly sticking to a script. And certainly we put historical accuracy at the very top of our
Of
list of what's
course.
important. But each guide has their own unique flair, insight, and reaction to those moments as they occur. And honestly, some of the best tours we do is when something totally unexpected happens, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something paranormally or haunted. Awesome when those moments do occur, but some random thing the guide is able to play off and riff off, which may come back several times throughout the tour. So there's definitely a lot of actors. Really, we have actors, historians, performers of all sorts, who love being in front of a crowd and sharing those stories. So yeah, blending all of those kinds of things together, I think makes the ideal tour guide for us.
And I know that you have different tours. Like for example, Ottawa is where I've done most of them, and so there's the Ghosts and the Gallows tour, which very specifically does go into the jail, but also does downtown. But then I went on a different tour that took us to a school and a whole bunch of other places, and so there's the variety of the, you start in the same area and you're on a different tour, but then you also have, you can go on the same tour with two different guides and have a marvelous experience and a unique experience both times, I think.
It's a great insight. No two tours are the same. Even
Yeah.
certainly if you have different guides, 100% different locations with a question, but even the same guide, it is just the subtle differences, like, kind of a bit of a cloudy, stormy night where it's not pouring rain is actually the perfect atmosphere for us,
Yeah.
to tell the story. So, and of course, what people have been doing themselves, what are they bringing into it?
Right.
If they've been touring sites all day, for example, if they're out of town visitors, they may be a little bit low energy. Whereas, if they've been sitting at home, kind of waiting to get out there and take part in the experience. So it is one of the best parts is, and I'm sure this is true of show business in general, is kind of like the fun is what is going to happen next.
Right.
And, how you can use that and bring it into your performance is really a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. So you have this amazing interactive experience, which is a unique experience people can do time and again. You've got the interaction between the guides and the groups, which is always going to be unique and dynamic. And then COVID-19, drum, like, uh-oh, our entire business is based upon tours, which require people to gather in close proximity. Because it's like, huddle around, I'm going to tell you a scary story about
Yep.
this early murder. It happened in Spark Street. Just, like, uh-oh, how do we huddle around? What did you guys do?
Well, it was, it's not particularly rare for us. Obviously, everyone went through this experience, but it was tough coming off our best year ever that we'd ever had. And, we innovated recently with new products called The Haunting, which is more like an immersive haunted house experience more than a ghost tour that we'd been doing at Laurier House in Ottawa, which is just a perfect Victorian mansion to do spooky things. And we did a similar product in Toronto. We're going to be expanding that to some other cities in Ontario. So, I mean, again, no extra sympathy for us compared to anyone else. But obviously took the legs out from under us. And it was, one of the most trying days I remember is, we have close to 100 part-time staff when we're running at full capacity. And, the day we realized it was better for our staff to lay them off, all of them, so they could access certain benefits, where our company shrunk from close to 100 employees down to 3 of us. And, given, I've been in the company for 18 years, obviously Glen right there from the beginning, and Rowena, who's our other manager and kind of the head office, it felt like such a step backwards. It felt like the opposite of everything we've been trying to do. But we realized we'd have to innovate, and we're all in this position. And we've always considered business a bit of a game. And okay, well, the rules have changed slightly. What can we do? How can we innovate? Where are the opportunities? And it did really push us towards e-commerce. Obviously, it was particularly in the beginning when we couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So we developed what we called home and board rescue packs in the very early days of the pandemic. So we would send, Haunted Walk merchandise and some books. Even your bookmark was included as an option for people to choose, your Ottawa Ghost Story book. And so that was kind of our first step at like, well, as you say, all we've sold are tour tickets before. What else can we do? Souvenirs, of course, at our locations at the end of the tour. But that went fairly well. And we were able to access some funding from BIAs and things of that nature. So very appreciative of the support we got. But we realized we could sell those. And then the question became, well, for us, in that spring of last year, what's Halloween going to look like? Not surprisingly, Halloween, of course, is the most important time for our business, when demand is highest, interest is highest. And, Halloween was completely up in the air at that point. So we launched a few different initiatives, some of them that worked and some of them that necessarily didn't, but all useful steps in the process. Kind of the first thing we did after the home and board packs went out, and that was going to be okay, we launched a Kickstarter campaign called, the Safe Halloween Project, where we were going to do all of these different things, depending on the funding released, including, like writing world leaders demanding that Halloween be acknowledged, all these kind of fun little things we could do. We were going to hold the world's largest seance, things of this nature. Now, I think it's important when we're talking about creativity in general. Sometimes the stuff you're doing doesn't exactly work, and it didn't. We raised, I think it was a good showing, 60-70% of our funding, but it didn't move forward. But one of the elements from there was this idea we had of virtual haunted campfires. and realizing we have a lot of friends in kind of the spooky business around the world. And many of those haunted creators, like us, were struggling. So was there a way we could all get together to kind of support each other and keep our audiences engaged? And that led to our virtual haunted campfires. So we did a run of those in October of 2020, which went over very well. And then we brought it back for kind of a winter's chill edition in the winter of 2021. Mark, you were one of our awesome guests we had during the run there. So it's been a great way to kind of connect, create community, drive a little bit of revenue when we can't sell any tickets at all. So it's been a lot of fun. When we have these campfires, as you know, Mark, like we'll meet with everyone ahead of time, and it's just so much fun to talk to all the haunted creators, the different strategies they're thinking about, what's going on in their countries. We had an Australian company on with us at one time, and I'd never had a meeting paused before, so that the person could turn their webcam, to show the kangaroo right outside their door. So it's been a great success, great community building. And the other thing we really wanted to look at was, is there a way we can bring Halloween to people if we can't bring them to us? And thankfully we were able to operate in October, but at really reduced capacity.
Right.
And that led to kind of our other innovation, which is a lot of fun to work on, which is called The Haunting at Home, which is a guided audio experience. It's part spooky, part philosophical, which really gets to the questions of what are ghosts and what role do we play in our observation, feeling of them, So it's kind of a little bit based on our podcast, Haunted Talks. So I'm the host of it. So I lead people through these kind of 6 experiments with the paranormal. And that's also been very well received. Of course, some people are terrified. They don't want to do anything like that in their house, which is fine.
I'll do it in someone else's house, not mine. I'm too scared.
Well, that's fine, And some people have even been going to haunted locations to do it, which is kind of even a notch up than I'd feel comfortable with, maybe. But it's been a lot of fun as well. And both with the virtual haunted campfires and the haunting at home, which are kind of going to be evergreen content, and people can purchase off our website at any time. It's been fun because we've been able to reach a much wider demographic than we normally would. I handle most of the marketing for the company. So typically we're advertising kind of Kingston, Ottawa, Toronto, and the areas around where, people might travel, drive a few hours kind of either way. But with these products that weren't location dependent anymore, suddenly, we're advertising into Australia. We're advertising into the UK. So that's been really fun to see those reports coming in from these places around the world, and to know that they're enjoying our products is a lot of fun, and kind of again continuing to build community and innovate as best we can with what we have at the time. And listen, obviously we're hopeful this year things seem on, knock on wood, are on track for us to return to something closer to normal as far as our business is concerned. But it's really nice also to have these kind of products built and established that, even if the kind of worst case scenarios happen now, we go back into lockdown, something extreme, we still have something of quality and unique to offer to our very spooky audience.
Well, I'm looking at interesting. So when you do a walk, you're probably limited to what is the maximum 30 people in a crowd, something like that.
Yeah, we spent 30, more recently around 20 or so, but yeah.
Yeah, but so you're limited in terms of being able to have a group that can actually hear you, and you're all together, as opposed to being not unwieldy, and geographically. But then all of a sudden, the ability for people from around the world who aren't in Kingston, who aren't in Ottawa, who aren't in Toronto, are able to participate. There's people from across Canada, there's people from around the world. You've even done, you did Laurier House themed evening, which I quite enjoyed, really enjoyed that. I look forward to going to do it in person. But then you did stuff from the UK as well. Like you can set them virtually anywhere. So I imagine you're probably going to continue some of that.
Yeah, we'd like to continue it, mostly because we're very fortunate that the audience was kind of demanding it at the end. When's the next one coming? We got a lot of emails like that, which we're very, very thankful for. But as a small business, we're now in that kind of that fulcrum where we're trying to decide, where do you spend your time right now? And we're probably looking to do a campfire. We'll probably do one in July, one in August,
Right.
and then probably a longer run in October as well. Because as you say, it's certainly very obvious to us. We have people who are interested in kind of who would come on our tour if they were in our city. But if they're not in our city or they've done a tour recently, is there something else we can provide, particularly during October? And thankfully, yeah, I think we will be able to do that.
So it makes me wonder the best of both worlds. For somebody like me who I'm far enough away from Toronto and Kingston and Ottawa that I can't just pop in. But if there was a Friday night tour, let's say there was a tour that was pre-recorded with a couple audience members that are willing to be in it. So you feel like you're standing in the crowd and you see the tour guide and you're actually going down the streets, but maybe from the at-home experience there's also a map that's showing you where they're going. Like, I can imagine that that could really potentially, I know it's a lot, it would be a lot of work to produce, but again, evergreen content. It's not like you're doing it live every time you do a walk, but it could be a, hey, well, I can't attend, but I can virtually attend this. I don't know, I kind of, it just intrigues me, the possibilities that the Pandora's box, if we're going to go with paranormal, that you've
No,
opened
it's
here.
true. It's absolutely true. And it's always a tough psychological mind shift because we so over the years, obviously, we put such an emphasis on kind of the in-person experience. Being able to stand in front of the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa
Yeah,
while you hear the story is kind of one thing that we can't quite
no,
replicate.
no.
But it's a different experience, and we're able to have different kind of fun. And when you were on, Mark, we do kind of like did little trivia games, which the audience and our guests can participate in, which we don't do on the tours, and probably wouldn't work
Yeah,
in the in-person environment. So I think you're right. It's finding kind of the best from several different things and applying them to the medium. Well, it feels like Marshall McLuhan would say something along the lines here, but I think you're totally right. There's a lot of possibilities, and consumer mindset has obviously shifted greatly too. I mean, I'm sure it's the case with you. We're certainly ordering more things online
yeah,
or through a digital means, whether those are physical products or experiences.
right.
We did my fiance is a big animal lover, so we did an animal show where all the animals came, and she got to meet all the animals and things like that. So I think people are going to be more open to it in the future too. The part I don't know is what happens in this interim where people are so eager to get outside and just do things in real life. But in the long term, I think the changes have been made, and looking ahead to figure out what those are going to be and how they could benefit us in our business in particular is obviously something we're giving a lot of thought to.
Wow, fascinating stuff. The possibilities, and then if that isn't all enough, all that work, all those things, you launched an amazing podcast that you're the host of. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast, the genesis of that, and how it's been going?
Yeah, I'm talking about the podcast. It really is kind of our baby in some ways because for me, it was kind of the same. It was kind of an early version. Now that we're talking about an early version of the virtual haunted campfires, realizing, we're obviously using the podcast as a marketing means, as an awareness means. So
Right,
people are interested in ghost stories, will find it, they'll follow us, particularly those people in our geographical communities. But just realizing, as we're thinking about it, there are so many great stories, and we cover, ghost stories, weird or dark history, kind of like roadside attractions, science, even, the science of zombies is an episode we've done. Um, those are things we can never do on tour,
right,
but there's some great stories to be told. And for me personally, working as kind of the creative director, I don't have very many opportunities to storytell, but I really I really enjoy it. And this created a little spot for me to kind of be able to give my own tour once every few weeks on a various topic. So we've had a lot of fun doing that. It's certainly grown over the years, and if anyone, I know podcasts are kind of very hot right now, and it's definitely something that takes commitment, but will grow if you're putting out a good product. And certainly our belief is the creative is always the variable of success. And I'm very fortunate, my partner Michelle and I, we kind of have a background in film, and so being able to edit audio was kind of a very easy step for us. And
right.
creating these rich landscapes and hopefully doing a decent job telling the stories and writing them up and those kind of things. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun, and it it's always, I love, I also love doing the research too, getting in the archives or starting to piece together informations or little bits of stories that maybe people have overlooked before. Our most recent podcast was about the vampire riots in Glasgow, Scotland in 1954, which is this great story of how all these kids thought there was a vampire. So hundreds of them went to the cemetery to take care of business on their own. But it's really a story about kind of censorship, and particularly around comic books, of like, the idea of having supernatural things or grotesque things in comic books at that time was obviously the reason children were having these too vivid imaginary experiences, like with vampires. So, I love, as I said, I love getting deep into the story and trying to figure out, how it connects to us, and what are the parts that are, really interesting, at least for me. And I love sharing those with our audience.
That is cool. Now, you mentioned briefly you had a background in film, so I'm curious about your background and how that led to, you and Haunted Walks.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking the other day about, you were in grade school and public school, and kind of one of the most magical moments. And I suspect, Mark, we're roughly around the same age. It was kind of the very end in grade school or public school when film projectors were still used, or even the slide projectors. Do you remember those? Yes. They were like a solid metal block. And
yeah.
But what I felt, and I didn't think about it consciously at the time, is when the lights went off, it became a completely different place, and new experiences were possible. And that, combined with storytelling, I think led me to film, because I did my undergrad in both English and film. And then I had a very difficult decision between law school and film school. I took film school, and I'm certain that is still the right decision. But it's, film is so much about storytelling. Obviously, there's experimental film, but certainly documentary was an area I was particularly interested in. And so these things have tied together nicely for me. How do you tell stories, particularly about the past or a place, in a way that engages people in a meaningful way? It's not just something superficial. And, this is maybe something that major museums or institutions maybe don't do particularly well. And, there's lots of examples on either side. I don't want to pick anyone out, but it's that accessibility, and maybe bringing history from kind of like a highbrow, elitist sounds too strong, but something that's kind of upper, to something that's more accessible to everyone, and that is part of everyone's story. And that's the fun part with the ghost tours, of course, is once people have been on our tours, locals in particular, sometimes we'll just be walking around and we'll hear someone telling one of our stories to their friends. Oh, actually, do you know the ghost story about that building? It's like, oh, that's really cool. And it's the same for Kingston. Kingston, Ontario now is recognized as like one of the most haunted cities in Ontario, but they didn't really have that reputation before we started giving the ghost tours there.
Right.
So being able to kind of make our cities that we operate in not only more enjoyable places to visit, but increase the kind of pride of people who live in those locations about the uniqueness and the richness of the history, is something, that's awesome. It's a really meaningful, adds a really meaningful component to what we do.
Oh, that's fantastic. So the sort of nearing the last sort of questions is, as a writer, as a storyteller, I know you have scripts. Obviously, you have actors who can adapt the scripts and the details and the historical accuracy. But how does the writing happen? I mean, especially like sometimes new stories evolve. Either they come from people there live. I've witnessed that, where somebody shares a tale. It's part of the experience. And you incorporate, how did new stories get incorporated, or new tours where you say, well, hey, we've got this thing, we can take you over here now. How does that work? I'm curious about the logistics of that.
It's a great question. And I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. Is there isn't necessarily one thread that leads from a story. Some are very research driven. For example, I don't even know, 10, 12 years ago, I ordered all of the archival information the province had on the old Carleton County Jail, now the Ottawa Jail Hostel, where we give tours. So, as you go through that information, there's a lot of there's a lot of things in those reports which are great stories. They just need a touch of storytelling put on them when you're talking about escapes and riots and
Yeah.
this kind of thing. It just needs a little window dressing. Uh, but some are more, as you say, some come from customers, and it's always a combination of we're interested in the history for sure, and different ghost tour companies have different approaches, but we really like to tie it to history as we look back. And I suppose there's kind of always a notion of trying to figure out who the ghost is or why they might be haunting a place. Uh, then we'll work collaboratively as a team, us up in head office. Usually someone will take a first crack at writing it with the research, and then we'll go through a few iterations. So I'm very thankful to have colleagues who are also, very creative, very intelligent, and it's a team effort. Everyone works on it. And over years too, our original haunted walk in Ottawa, which is the tour you did, you mentioned going to Ottawa's famous haunted high school. We've been doing that tour for 20 years, but it always evolves, not quickly, because what we have discovered is if you take out some stories, people get very upset if that's their favorite story.
Yes, I want to hear it again.
Well, exactly. But there's always a process. Like if we find new information about a particular place or haunting, we can add that in. Or if there's reason to believe that we no longer believe the research, that went into a particular story, if there's a reason to take it out, we can do that as well. And then we're able to combine that with the kind of in-field testing. And I guess this would be like test readers when you're thinking about authors. Our audience give us direct feedback. And if our tour guides are consistently having a problem with the order of how a story is unfolding or the language in particular parts, then we get that feedback, and with them we can work to revise. So the scripts are very much living documents, even though some of them change at very slow pace.
Right.
Newer tours will change much faster, because as you say, once we get people doing new experiences, like at Black Creek Pioneer Village in Toronto, so many people have gone there, particularly for school trips, that all of a sudden all of these stories will start coming out of the woodwork. And it's a lot of fun putting them together, that's for sure. One of my favorites actually is we do over the years we've done what we call fact or fiction tours, which is be kind of one of our normal tours, but we'll throw one or two stories we have made up. So I love the challenge of kind of writing a fake story that sounds exactly like one of our real ones, and what all the elements are, and what are the tells you have to avoid. So it's kind of maybe an intellectual exercise for us, but fun to see if we can trick people. I was like, nope, actually that was a real story. Nope, that one was completely made up.
Do you ask at the end of the story if they think it was real, or do you wait till the end of the tour and say which ones were real, which ones were fake?
On those tours, and those are only special events we do them at the end. So then everyone who gets the fake story correct, we'd have a prize or something, for people to win and whatnot. So it's kind of a different method of storytelling, combining kind of fiction and nonfiction at the same time, and leaving it to the audience to sort that out.
It's like a game show ghost tour theatrical experience. It's all three rolled into one, and you have that wonderful trivia you do on your virtual that's in person, so you can translate some of it.
Well, it's kind of cool. Gamification has been such a big thing for us, and the tours have become much more interactive over time too. I would say, usually it would, in the beginning, the tour guide would tell the story, move to the next spot, tell the story, so on and so forth, which is a lot of companies still do it that way, and it's a perfectly fine way to do the tour. But what we realized is people enjoy, being a little bit more involved. So, for example, our tour at the Ottawa jail, we'll do a quick reenactment of the trial of Patrick James Whalen, who was eventually executed for the assassination of Darcy McGee. So we'll have customers play various parts, and we'll give them a little sheet, and they'll kind of read their lines and whatever. So another way of kind of bringing people in, kind of like the fact or fiction elements, in making the stories kind of more relevant to them somehow, even if it's just playing along with the game or having some silly fun.
Wow, that is cool. I don't want to play the person who found the faceless woman in the woman's washroom in the jail. That would have been too much. So speaking of which, when we went the last time I went on the Ghost in the Gallows tour with my partner Liz, I was researching for the book, Creepy Capital. It's like, who better than you awesome people who provided material and photos for me. Thank you. But she was hoping to see something because she's a non-believer. I'm a believer. She was hoping to see something because she's very curious and open-minded. And I was hoping not to see anything because I'm terrified of the whole thing. And I know that people have experienced strange things on the tours. Have you ever experienced anything strange, either in the research or on one of the walks? Or
It's a great question. And in some ways, I'm so down philosophical question of what a ghost is right now. I'm not even sure if I would necessarily recognize, or if we would have recognized when we might be interacting with something we would think of as a ghost. There's kind of very narrow definitions, I feel, in some ways as to what a ghost might be. Setting that larger philosophical question aside, I have had a few things certainly that are very memorable. In my first year of giving tours, up in the jail there, I had a group of grade 7 or grade 8, it's a small class, 15, 12 kids or whatever. And as I've been doing the tours there, this was in our early days. We were still using actual candles in our lanterns. Since then, we switched to electronic to be more environmentally mindful and things of that nature. But when I would go in the cell number 4, which is the last stop on death row there before you were taken to the gallows, the candle in my lantern would either go out or just like really die down to a faint blue color. And so I wanted to, I'm very interested in experiments and trying to replicate things. So I was like, I decided I was going to tell the group what had been happening to me and see if, their teacher would take the lantern and lead us into cell number 4 to see if it would happen to them. Maybe I was holding the lantern and wildly talking or something. Maybe, I was to blame. And the teacher was actually pretty cocky about the whole thing. And so I said, okay, well, everyone, let's line up behind the teacher here, gave her the lantern. And as soon as she crossed the threshold of that cell, candle.
oh,
She was so upset. I had to really do my best to try to keep things calm. And she determined that it was the wick in the candle that was burnt out. But we used these candles at that time for a couple of tours at least. And I said I didn't think so, but I promised her, I'd relight it as soon as I got back to our ticket booth, and I did. And it burned just fine. Now, is that necessarily a ghost? I don't know, but it's interesting that it happened to them. And kind of a very similar story I had is at the Bytown Museum in Ottawa, which is also the oldest stone structure here in town, right at the kind of the foot of the locks of the canal between Parliament Hill and the Chateau Laurier. And one of the very common occurrences there is the sound of someone walking up the stairs behind you, of course, when there's no one there. So one Halloween, I was there preparing, with some of my colleagues, and we're going around the building, setting up the lighting and that kind of thing. And I'd spent enough time in the building that I certainly wasn't very nervous about it or didn't expect anything to happen to me. But as I walked up the stairs from the first to the second floor, I got halfway up and heard one of my colleagues coming up the stairs behind me, and didn't like, it was so obvious to me that, oh, they must have slipped through the door just as it was about to close, and I didn't hear them open it. No problem. Well, I turned around to look, and there was nobody there, but you could hear the footsteps continue for another kind of 1 or 2 paces. So I've had that experience, which is something quite a few people report in the Bytown Museum. But we do wonder, because we're kind of PR agents for ghosts. We wonder if we hope that they're happy with us as we're drawing attention to them and getting people interested in them. So maybe they don't give us, or at least me, their worst scares, but certainly some of our customers have had really unique experiences. At Black Creek Pioneer Village in Toronto a couple of years ago, a couple of our customers and our tour guides saw an apparition, which is very rare to actually see a physical form. Certainly there's, more common would be a sensation of presence, being watched, door slamming, chain rattling on the cell doors. But on this occasion, we had 2 guides and 2 customers walking to catch up to a group, and one of our guide and one of the customers, saw this woman, and our guide kind of joked, "Everyone sees that woman in old-fashioned clothing, right?" Which is a great joke to make as you're going to a ghost tour. But when the other 2 said no, and 2 could see them, well, they followed this figure who walked directly through the door of the building. So anytime you get 2 different sources with the exact same description of what's occurred, that's very interesting. So we, of course, love when things happen to our customers, and some of them some customers really want things to happen, as you say. Some would prefer it's just a regular tour and nothing too exciting. But we love those stories. It's endlessly fascinating to kind of ponder and wonder what it's all about.
Well, God, Jim, it is endlessly fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing so much about Haunted Walks. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find out about Haunted Walks, where they can find the podcast, all the things that you guys are up to?
Yeah, certainly our website is kind of the best overall spot, and that's hauntedwalk.com. No S on the end, hauntedwalk.com. The podcast is called Haunted Talks. So that's available on our website or on any major podcast platform. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you search for Haunted Talks, you'll probably find it there as well. And thanks so much, Mark. It's been great to be with you and chat today, and we appreciate the support you've given our business, through your book and through the virtual haunted campfire as well. We certainly appreciate that as well.
Awesome. Always great to connect, Jim, and have a spooky afternoon.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Fascinating conversation with Jim. And before I get into reflecting about some of the things I was thinking about when I was listening back to that interview, I want to reflect on Haunted Walks and the fact that they were in Ottawa, the very first ghost walk I went on. And as I mentioned to Jim in the interview, I fell in love with history. That was the very first time ever that I actually thought Canadian history could be interesting. I do remember a brief snippet. There was an old TV show called Head of the Class. Howard Hessman from WKRP. He was this kind of hippie, kind of cool teacher. And it was an interesting, I think it was a half-hour show. And in one of the episodes in the class, he talked about one of the prime ministers of Canada, Mackenzie King, actually having seances and talking to the dead. And which, again, I learned more about that on the Haunted Walks and wrote about that in Creepy Capital. But, before this Haunted Walk, before this three-dimensional interactive experience, I thought history was dull. And so they opened up my eyes to so many things. And then when I was working on Creepy Capital, ghost stories of the Ottawa region, I used and referenced the Haunted Walks founder Glen Shackleton's book on the ghosts of Ottawa. I also referenced and used his Ghosts of Kingston book for parts of Haunted Hospitals, another book that I wrote for Dundurn. But when I was working on Creepy Capital, Liz and I went on a couple more ghost walks with Haunted Walks. And even though I'd been on one of those walks before, I was there madly taking notes along the way. Because as Glenn said, no two tours are the same, no two guides. And it was many, many years difference between the two of them. But I took tons of notes. I took photos, a couple of which are actually used in the book. And I also reached out to the group to ask if I could use some of the photos of their group that they had on their website, because I thought they looked awesome. And I wanted readers of the book, I wanted people who picked up the book Creepy Capital to know about these great walks, how those walks inspired me, which led to this book. And kind of give back to the group in some small way for all of the things that they gave me and give so many others. And it was cool because they started to carry the book Creepy Capital in the gift shop where they sell tickets on Spark Street in Ottawa. And that's such a cool thing to see that sort of collaborative team spirit. And that was just an interesting side effect. Now, this past winter, Jim reached out to me to ask me to participate in the virtual haunted campfire. Now, we did a themed Don't Go Into the Woods event where I shared spooky stories about the outdoors, plenty of creepy, eerie stuff from the Sudbury and Northern Ontario, mid-Northern Ontario region. Now, I earned money from that live event, and I just recently cashed a second check because it's still on the website. People can still purchase the experience. Now, they don't have that interaction and the game show stuff that's live, but they can still enjoy that event at their own comfort, at their own leisure, whenever they want. And it's relatively inexpensive, and it's earning revenue for Haunted Walks as well as for me. Hey, that's a cool thing. Now, this is more leading into the reflection aspect, but I wanted to give you that bit of a backstory because I so admire the way that Jim talks about the way that this group has experimented with their core brand, and they've created numerous related experiences, both in person and virtual, to keep the company going. Now, we do the same thing as writers. We're always looking for ways to optimize the things that we've written in different formats. For example, I have my books: Haunted Hamilton, Spooky Sudbury, Tomes of Terror, Creepy Capital, Haunted Hospitals, Macabre Montreal. They're all traditionally published. I've licensed the rights to a publisher, and that's mostly a print book game for me. I make most of the revenue off of those print book sales, very, very few in ebooks. But they've spun into other things. They have spun into, over the years, paid talks at libraries and other venues, being brought onto national radio, like George Norrie's Coast to Coast, which basically is heard across North America in probably 50 or 60 different markets, which always leads to a bump in sales, which, again, I can't see the bump in sales on the print books, but I still notice a bump in sales on my other books that aren't even these ghost story books, because plenty of the listeners, when they find out that I have, fiction and these werewolf books, etc., they get excited about those. But other things that they've spun off into, besides the paid talks, are indie published books. So, Too Macabre for Montreal was a book Shayna Krishnasamy and I released. We had Macabre Montreal, but there were several chapters that were just too macabre. They were too disturbing. Our developmental editor at Dundurn said, no, you can't. You cut this chapter, cut that chapter. They're too disturbing. They're too over the top. They're too dark. And I jokingly said, they're too macabre for Montreal. So Shane and I released, it's only about 15,000 word, maybe 12,000 word, mini book called Too Macabre for Montreal, in ebook and in print. And again, it's those stories that were just too dark for that more feel good, happier thrill ride ghost story book, because these ones are more true crime-ish, serial killers, a little bit more disturbing. But there are a few other indie titles coming related to the research I've been doing for the books to sell to Dundurn, like Ghostly Gananoque, which is probably a market that would be too small for a big publisher to take on. Screaming Skulls and Other Haunted Objects, based on many of the stories I've already written about, and other ones that I just couldn't place because they weren't tied to a specific location like most of my books are. And there's a few more on the back burner. There's always those ideas that are coming. Some of them I'm pitching to publishers, other ones I'm planning on doing myself. But then there's also the virtual haunted campfire event that I talked about, inspired from the research. There's also the voice map, that virtual GPS-enabled walking tour that I've done of downtown Hamilton. Now, I recently just received a payment from them, too. And then got notification just this morning, as I'm recording this on June 10th, that I sold another one, because I get notified every time somebody buys through that app. And I have also been in discussions with another company I can't talk about right now, but it's a different kind of print product for use of some of my haunted research yet again. That is not only going to earn me royalties and revenue, but it's also going to help me sell the pre-existing books. They all work together. I'm hoping you can see that this single passion or knowledge or bed of research or all this work you've put into something can be spun into different things. For me, it's been spun into 5 different things so far, with more to come. And 5 different things, 5 different kinds of products, 5 different ways for me to earn revenue off that single passion. So never mind the theory, always be closing. I'm going to argue that as an author, you should always be opening. You should be opening yourself up to new ideas, new opportunities, new formats, new ways of expressing and sharing the work and talent that is uniquely you and yours to offer the world. Well, that's it for this reflection. That's it for this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, my name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. If you want to support this podcast, one of the best things you can do is you can share this with someone that you think would find great value in the podcast. You can also leave a review over on the podcatcher of your choice, and I do appreciate those reviews because that's another way that helps other people discover these Stark Reflections. If you want, you can also become a patron of the Stark Reflections podcast and support it over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where for as little as $1, $3, or $5 a month, you get access to additional content, additional bonus content, including reflections on other podcasts. And I want to say a huge shout out to all of my awesome patrons who do support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that you're throwing that extra money my way. That really means a lot to me. Thank my sponsor, Findaway Voices. Thank my patrons. And thank you, dear listener, for being here, because I cannot have this podcast without you. So thanks for listening. Until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.